Hello good people, Eber here with Hardware Connects, and MSI challenged us to build a budget-themed gaming PC around the B450 platform. Essentially, this build should be able to game at 1080p without a problem. It should also be able to do general productivity tasks as well as a little bit of streaming, so it's really geared towards an all-in-one type of system that can do pretty much everything that you throw at it. Nothing too intensive, something that's in the middle ground when it comes to productivity, gaming, and of course, a little bit of streaming as well. So we agreed to that, and as you can see, I do have it set up right behind me. So let's check it out right after this.
So you're saying this is the most colorful way to cool? I'm telling you, the Master Liquid ML360R RGB is the way to go. Cooler Master's new 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler is all about performance in style, with a custom low-resistance radiator and dual-chamber pump with sleeve tubing for that premium look while being totally flexible. The fans strike a balance for air pressure and airflow with transparent blades to perfectly match the colorful combination of the pump that you can sync via its own controller or through various addressable and 12-volt RGB connectors. Alright, perhaps you should check it out in the description below.
Alright, so our CPU of choice was the Ryzen 5 2600X, priced at $230. It's about $30 more than the 2600, but since it has a TDP of 95 watts versus 65 watts for the 2600, overclocking headroom will be a little bit better. This is because things like XFR2 and Precision Boost 2 will take advantage of the additional power headroom. The 6-core 12-thread design may be a little bit overkill for games, but at the same time, the intent for this build is an all-around PC for work, streaming, and gaming. Moving on to the real foundation of this build, meet the MSI B450 Tomahawk, and you can pick this up for as low as $100. Now, I know that pairing up a $100 motherboard with a $230 processor may sound a bit crazy, but hear me out for a second, because I think the B450 lineup is actually a lot better for these types of Ryzen 2 builds than the more expensive X470 platform. First and foremost, the B450 chipset only supports a single GPU, but at the same time, in this price range, who is really going to be using Crossfire or SLI anyways? Past that, AMD has equipped it with pretty much all the same technology as the X470, just with a little bit less connectivity all around. Now, at this point in time, you're probably wondering why you should buy a B450 motherboard over a B350, since both technically support the Ryzen 2 processors. First and foremost is the new chipset's compatibility with AMD's StoreMI technology. StoreMI allows you to combine an SSD, hard drive, and part of the system memory as local cache for a very fast, very efficient storage setup. Think of it as Optane on steroids, and I'll be covering a head-to-head comparison between AMD's StoreMI technology and Intel Optane, so definitely stay tuned for that video very soon. Now, instead of simply updating their B350 board, MSI took the B450 Tomahawk to a very different route, and that's why I ended up choosing it for this build. Other than the cool overall design, which looks absolutely amazing for $100, it features a more extended PWM heatsink design. There's also finally a BIOS flashback option, which actually works without a CPU or memory installed. Also, if things go wrong during the BIOS update process, it will simply allow you to revert to an older version without any issues. Probably the best thing about B450 is its ability to overclock Ryzen processors. Now, that might not sound like news, but remember, the competing Intel H370, which costs about the same amount of money, doesn't allow for any overclocking at all, which is disappointing. The amount of features you get for the price you pay is pretty amazing as well. For example, MSI added USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A and Type C connectors on the rear I/O. There's an NVMe M.2 slot with access to 4 PCI lanes for ultra-fast storage speeds and 6 fan headers placed at pretty logical locations. Of course, MSI also added some onboard RGB lighting and compatibility with their Mystic Light Sync. Speaking of lighting, if you want to add some flair to your PC, and by that I meant by just adding some subtle RGB lighting, the NMAX TB RGB fans are an excellent addition. They feature these unique halo arc illuminations around the frame that I'm personally a huge fan of, plus they can easily be synced via MSI's Mystic Lighting software, which is nice. And remember, this is just an option, so if you're willing to expand your budget for this build, investing in some great RGB fans like the NMAX TB is something to consider. For memory, I went with Corsair's 16GB DDR4 Vengeance LPX modules rated at 2400 MHz. Now these guys go for around $150, and it's refreshing to go with something non-RGB and low profile. It also matches the B450 Tomahawk board really well, plus I do want to mention the speed of this memory module because it is at 2400 MHz, and while it can be overclocked to a more respectable 2666 MHz, Ryzen does perform a little bit better with faster memory. Saving some money and going with a 2400 MHz kit and then overclocking a bit might be a good option. Alright, so for storage, I chose the Toshiba RC100 240GB NVMe SSD. This little guy costs less than $80 and sports read speeds well above 1.6 gigabytes per second and writes over a gigabyte per second. Again, for $80. And that's incredible considering that there are SATA-based SSDs in the market for that price. Now for storing my game library, I threw in a 1TB Western Digital Blue Caviar hard drive, which should do the trick, but I did find a 2TB 5400 RPM hard drive on Amazon for around $60. Which is about the same price as the 1TB drive. Now on to the graphics card, which is the most exciting part, and I went with MSI's RX 580 Mech 8GB OC. Now this thing is designed for better cooling over the reference-based models. The OC mode allows you to achieve core clock speeds as far as 1390 MHz with memory clock speeds over 8000 MHz. It features dual Torx 2.0 fans for effectively cooling the 6mm copper heat pipes located underneath a large heatsink. The fans stop spinning completely when the GPU temps are below 60 C, giving users the flexibility when it comes to acoustic performance. You also get a solid brushed aluminum backplate with some aggressive design elements, and the LED logo on the side is RGB, so you can control that through MSI's gaming app. Powering the whole system is Corsair's CX550 non-modular PSU with an 80+ bronze certification. For $50, this should be more than enough to power the 2600X and the RX 580, plus it does have a little bit of room for upgradability down the road. Now, given that this is a non-modular unit, you're pretty much stuck with the cables that come with it, so if you're looking to go a bit beyond the budget we have over here to maybe add some visual elements to your build, CableMod's basic ModFlex extension kits would be an excellent addition, as it's simply an extension rather than a full kit for the PSU. Plus, around $35, it comes in a variety of color options, so that's pretty awesome. The case of choice for this build is the Phanteks P300 Mid-Tower ATX enclosure. For $60, I think it's an awesome buy because it comes with a tempered glass side panel, a separate power supply shroud, RGB lighting integrations, a clean interior design to work with, and personally speaking, I really like its relatively compact form factor. I went with the black and white variant, which is priced a little bit higher than the standard edition, but you're really not losing anything in terms of features aside from the color options, so that's nice. Well, now that we've taken a look at the parts list, here's a little montage of me putting together the entire PC. And here is the final build in all its glory. I'm actually really happy with the way how this turned out. Working with the Phanteks P300Ks is an absolute breeze. You're really not going to have any issues with cable management because I certainly didn't experience any of them whatsoever, routing them to inside the main chamber. They do have separate cutouts, so that's great. The white interior does a really good job showcasing the B450 Tomahawk motherboard from MSI. What's really cool about this white interior that's inside the P300 case is that it diffuses the ambient lighting on the motherboard really well, so I really like that. Also, shout out to Phanteks for including a subtle RGB element right between the tempered glass panel and the separate power supply shroud. It just completes the whole build in my opinion, and it looks fantastic. I mean, you can just literally take a look at it behind me. It looks great. I absolutely love the way how this looks. So having looked at this PC, we obviously have to talk about performance. So why don't we get into that? Now, initially I decided to go with the stock cooler that came with the Ryzen 2600X, but from my previous reviews in the past, I did mention that if you want to squeeze a little bit of performance by overclocking the chip, or if you do intend to plan some overclocking for the 2600X, you're actually much better off investing in an aftermarket cooling solution. So I decided to swap the stock cooler with Thermaltake's Flow Ring 240mm AIO cooler, and not only does it come with a high-performance water block, sleeve tubings, but it also has RGB lighting. So if you do want to add lighting to your system without investing in LED strips or underglow lighting, this is a good way to save cost on that end, but it also squeezes a little bit of performance out of the 2600X. The two 120mm high static pressure fans come with this beautiful frame illumination that looks very subtle and sleek, and interestingly, this kit also works with Amazon Alexa. Talk about controlling fan speeds with your voice. That's pretty cool. Anyways, back to performance, and I managed to overclock the 2600X to 4.125 GHz at 1.425 volts using Ryzen Master software. The memory speed also was set to 2400 MHz, given that this is an inexpensive Ryzen compatible kit. I ran a few synthetic tests comparing stock versus overclock settings to see if there is a difference, and I shouldn't be expecting, but let's take a look. Kicking things off with CINEBENCH R15 at stock settings, we got a score of 1300, and with the chip overclocked to 4.125 GHz, we got a bump on that score by 76 points, which isn't too bad, but I'll take that any time of the day. Next up with Blender, rendering the BMW scene. At stock settings, the system took 6 minutes and 12 seconds to complete it, compared to 5 minutes and 39 seconds with the overclock. Moving on to some productivity, and I mean, I did really push this chip really hard with 4K editing, so I rendered a 12-minute 4K project with GH5 footage, and at stock settings, the system took 24 minutes and 51 seconds compared to 23 minutes and 50 seconds with the overclock. So you're really going to be saving only a minute, which isn't too much, but at least it's something. And now onto some gaming performance, starting off with 3D Mark FIRESTRIKE. The system scored 12,804 with stock settings compared to 12,844 with the overclock. Again, very similar performance. Moving on to Battlefield 1 at 1080p set to ultra settings. We pretty much saw similar results, albeit I did experience a little bit of a frame drop with the overclock. And then we have Overwatch at 1080p set to epic settings. Again, same results here with both settings averaging well over 110 frames per second. Our last test here is Doom at 1080p set to Ultra using the VULKAN API, and as you can see, once again, we're seeing similar results with both stock and overclock settings averaging well over 145 frames per second. The CPU temperatures were respectable. At stock settings with the stock cooler, the 2600X ran at 34C idle and 75C under load, but with the overclock using the Thermaltake Flow AIO cooler, the 2600X ran around 74 degrees Celsius under load and 46 degrees Celsius during idle. Now we wanted to add some peripherals to complete this setup, and we chose MSI's GK40 Vigor gaming combo set, and this comes with a basic RGB membrane keyboard and of course the basic mouse. It gets the job done, and for $65 we thought that there was a perfect fit for this build. And when you put together the parts list on Amazon at the time of making this video, including an operating system and of course the MSI peripheral set, you're looking at around just a tad above $1,000, which is actually a really good system, or I guess a good setup for the price. Do note that this is excluding the Thermaltake AIO cooler. When you add that factor in, you're looking at just a little bit over $1,300.
For our Canadian audience, Memory Express is a place to go for home, business, and gaming electronics. You can try before you buy, especially great for peripherals, by visiting one of their stores in Winnipeg, Calgary, or Greater Vancouver, and more. They do custom PCs and will beat any Canadian price, guaranteed.
And that about wraps up this build video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about the components that I've chosen for this particular PC. Also, what do you guys think about the way how it looks? Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan of it? Love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Huge thanks to MSI and our other partners for making this video possible. I'm Iber with Hardware Canucks. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out some relevant content over here. Subscribe to our new Boot Sequence channel. And I'll see you all in the next one.